So from that standpoint, we're advocating a form-based code for the streetscape and the landscaping. And a very good evidence of that you can see right now is MoDOT's landscaping of South 7 Highway. MoDOT went in and landscaped the entire center quarter. They've established a pattern of trees and elements. We're talking with staff and MoDOT about mirroring that within the private development on either side, so that for several miles in South Blue Springs, there will be a consistent landscaping pattern from Colburn clear up to the Blue Springs Christian Church. The difference in a form-based code is that you would actually get into specifying the street lighting, signage, building setbacks, utility locations, nature of the building materials, facing the public domain. We're not concerned about whether or not the material's on the back of the building or not. That doesn't help anybody out. There's some really nice multifamily projects done in Lawrence by Fritzl's construction company, where when you drive by it, and you've probably seen it on 6th Street, it looks like the whole project's out of brick from the public domain. You drive back in there and you realize it's not all out of brick. But what you see from the street and what's presented to the community is a brick project. On the private side of this equation, I think you will find broad acceptance by the development community and business owners. When people understand what the game plan is, then they know what to do. Right now there is no plan. So to a certain extent, this is like trying to, play a basketball game in which nobody knows where to run on the court to get the ball. And so as a result, I come in and I talk to someone and I have my vision, but my vision hasn't been socialized with your vision, and therefore the next thing you know, we think we have competing visions. And it's because there hasn't been a process of establishing an overall plan. And quite frankly, what happens in the more mature cities that I've worked in, Scottsdale is a very good example, other communities in California, Aspen, Colorado, those communities are very advanced in understanding how to deal with the private sector. You don't have confrontational issues between the parties. We go to Scottsdale, we know what they want, we know what the planning scheme is for the street, and all we have to do is mirror that in our plans. We don't get in a big argument. Here, I can't tell you how many times there's been arguments on projects about the excessive landscaping ordinance in Blue Springs. Yada, yada, yada. But it comes then into, we're all trying to understand what we're talking about, and we all bring our own biases to that situation. And in many cases, we think that our way is better than someone else's way. With regards to the private sector, we need to have increased quality submittals with regards to color renderings and material samples. The current ordinance does not support that we have a better submittal than what we've done in the past. A very good example is that if you go back and look at the old information online from APA, for the rendering that was done for the new convention center and hotel, the rendering of that building and what is constructed look identical. So there wasn't any bait and switch. And so the applicant needs to provide a rendering of what the project really is going to look like, and not some other project that it's not really going to be. It's our personal opinion that all projects above a certain scale and size, and that's something that can be debated, need to be done by a registered architect, but specifically in a designated corridor. And by that I mean one of the key public domain corridors. There are too many projects that are being done in Blue Springs by non-registered professionals. You may have a structural engineer stamping drawings for a significant building, and that goes through your process, and that's not what you want. When you look at the quality projects in town, they've been designed by registered architects. The additional item is on landscaping. You have a landscaping ordinance that was enacted several years ago to try and get people with registered licensing to stamp the projects. But we find, you've got plans that are going through from some old Joe out in Timbuktu who's retired, and for $50 he stamps the drawings. He never saw the design. He never looked at what the city standards were. He didn't even really care. He just wanted his $50. And so to take it to the next step, we've suggested that you have a registration process where firms like Land Plan that we work with, they actually have to come in and register with the city, show evidence of their past work, and show that they're an active landscape architectural firm. And it's not just Joe that's retired down in Oklahoma but just happened to have a Missouri license and is stamping drawings. The other item on the last page, and I'll wrap up here quickly, is that one of the things that happens is that you may be shown in the, what I would call the site plan and design review stage, colored elevations, a colored site plan, a little colored drawing of landscaping. What happens in that particular case is that those drawings are then converted from schematic drawings to design development drawings, eventually to working drawings. They're then bid, and then they're done by subcontractors who then submit change orders. So by the time the drawings get down to the building down there, what Scott, what council, what planning commission saw is not the same project. Now, I don't want you to think that that's a bait and switch. What's happening is that that project is going through what is referred to as value engineering, and that's a very normal process. But what's happening is that as it changes, the people that are now the safeguard of the community are down here, and they may have no idea exactly what was shown at Planning Commission. They weren't at those meetings. So the last item we have here is that we think that there should be an outline provided to the city with regards to any deviations from the original PUD submittal that council and planning commission approved. Now, that doesn't mean that it shouldn't be approved. It just means that if I go in and I showed you a building that had a metal roof and now I'm doing a building that has concrete tile roof, that's a big deviation. I need to talk to someone about that and make a decision whether or not that needs to go back to planning commission or not. There is no process now to do that.
Do you think that determination should be made by staff? At what point do you, because at this point, if the, let's say the concept plan is deviated from, it's a staff decision whether that's a major or minor change. Do you think it should be the same requirement for this?
Ultimately, you can't so laboriously legislate it or write it, a certain percentage of this or that or the other. It really comes down to a judgment. And you have to rely upon, the head of community development to look at this and say, this is either within that domain or not within that domain. If you have a corridor plan, you could have a review committee that's made up of staff, a builder from the community, a council member or something, and they could review that plan, just like I think as a part of your downtown plan, you have a committee that reviews submittals. And if it's okay, then the submittal goes forward. In other words, your form-based code downtown would be no different than the form-based code in the corridor scenario.
Problem is where do you stop on that? I mean, is it so I'm changing the different color styles of the tile, or
I agree, and that's
where you're getting into.
I don't disagree, because you come in and you think you're going to do this particular color of brick, you bid it out, the brick's not exactly the same. So then how much is a deviation from red ochre-based brick versus red?
See, now you get the city
brick
designing the project.
Yeah, we don't want them.
We don't want that.
And I'm not
the word
suggesting
substantial is in our current code. Staff makes determined if it's a substantial change. I would say probably a change in tile color would not be considered substantial. If it's the word substantial, I know it's still a judgment call, but the word substantial kind
It's
of...
the judgment calls I don't like, because we get other people in the planning department that says I'm bashing somebody from old here, but that he's thinking everything might be substantial to him, and that's why
I agree that any time you do an ordinance, though, if you do a form-based ordinance, part of the ordinance is a definition of terms.
Now, if you're going clay tile to wrinkle metal,
it's, in that definition of terms, you can articulate what represents substantial.
And then
deviations
you still have a
of
shot
color.
Commission City Council
Yeah, that needs to go to the, like, architectural review committee or something instead of going to the city council.
Right,
But
you wouldn't have to go clear back through a council process, but, but on the other hand, if the committee says, wait